Today I'm at the Admiral Digby Museum talking to Gail Hersey, who is the past president and volunteer here at the Admiral Digby Museum. Now, perhaps you can tell me a little bit about the history of the museum, the house itself, and how it all came about.
Well, the house was known as the Woodrow Dakin House, and it is a Loyalist house. And the architecture outside, there are special features to it, and it has to do with the windows, the way they are spaced apart. The house itself was, years ago, it was apartment house. This is before it became a library. And from the library, it became the Admiral Digby Museum, which is operated by the Admiral Digby Library and Historical Society.
So how did it become known as Admiral Digby? You said the town had a name previous to this?
Yes, the town's name was Conway.
Why Conway?
Because that was Seymour Conway. That's where the name Conway came from. But now they wanted to change it in 1787 for the Admiral Robert Digby. They changed the name.
Now, I'm assuming this would have been an English admiral, right?
Yes,
all right.
Very much so.
So did he settle here?
Well, some people say he never stayed here, but...
Well, excuse me, but if you name a town from somebody, don't you usually stick around?
Yeah, this is what our thinking is as well, yes.
You just don't come in, wave, oh, thank you very much, name it for me, and I'm off on my way off to jolly England, thank you. Was there a whole bunch of towns named after him?
That's right. But he was a wonderful gentleman. He was a wonderful rear admiral, and he gave a beautiful bell to the Trinity Anglican Church.
Now, I'm looking around here, and we're in a parlor. And
yes.
It's a Victorian parlor, I assume?
It is.
I'm looking at the top hat and the suit.
It is.
So this would have been very much a social gathering here?
Yes, particularly on Sundays, because this is when the pastor or the priest would come for a visit, and it would be the parlor where they would entertain him.
So music, conversation?
Yes, yes.
Maybe a little drink?
Well, that could be. Maybe it was not only tea, but other things.
Well, it certainly spice up the conversation if it wasn't tea, right?
That's true.
Now, you have an old suit of clothes here, and you have a couch and all the rest of it. This all came from local people?
Yes. And most generally, our policy is when we accept an artifact or a piece of furniture, it should have a little bit of history about either the town of Digby or the municipality.
How would you determine that?
We ask the people that bring it in.
You ask people who bring it in. Of course, you ask the people who bring it in.
And then they tell us.
And they always tell you the truth, right?
Well, I hope they do.
You hope they do, right?
I hope they do, yeah.
Now, I see some portraits on the wall.
They were people that lived in the Digby Neck area, most generally Waterford.
They look very severe.
Well, they did back then, didn't they?
They did.
I'm wondering if they had a sense of humor.
Well, my understanding is a lot of it had to do with teeth.
It's true.
Portraits of
yes.
at that time
yes.
was that at one time it was considered vulgar to smile, and then the other thing was that people had bad teeth.
Mm-hmm.
So you wouldn't smile to hide your teeth.
Okay.
We both had an experience with dentists, so maybe they had the same.
Maybe.
I see there's the wallpaper. A lot of this would have been not reconstructed or done over, right? Because
yes.
being an apartment building, imagine it had been painted many times.
No, this was done by some volunteers that we had years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how long have you been a volunteer here?
I've been a volunteer for 28 years.
28 years?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And prior to that, you were a?
School teacher.
School teacher. So you went from school teacher to volunteer?
Yes, that's right.
Are you here pretty well every day?
Used to be.
Used to be.
Yeah.
All right. Now, perhaps you can tell me some of the exhibits that you have here. I know I saw a Maud Lewis one.
Yes.
What type of exhibits people could expect to see when they visit here at the Admiral Digby
Museum? Well, actually, we have the Loyalist Room first, being the Admiral Digby Museum. Then we have the War Room, which is a collection of articles that people have given us of veterans and it's very nicely displayed. And then we have a collections room, which has Mi'kmaq, and we have a Black heritage couple of items, collections in there. Then we have the bedroom, which is made up like a bedroom, and that has a lot of interesting things. Crazy quilts, for instance, okay? Then we have what is known as our famous Digby room, and that is where we have Maud Lewis. And Maud Lewis is, you would call it a body frame, I guess, that was made by Terry Gilbert, very nicely done. In fact, for that piece that we have, it came from the Information Bureau, just down the road. And Maud, the model of Maud, was on a lovely red bench. And people came to the Information Bureau, and there were a lot of children. And they decided looking up Maud's dress. So the group at the Information Bureau was very upset. So they had to find a safe and secure place for Maud. So they called, and we have Maud, which turns out to be a beautiful place for her.
And
okay.
they leave her dress alone, right?
And they leave the dress alone. Okay.
So perhaps
you wanted stories, so.
Yes, I wanted a story, but all right. So maybe we can go and have a look at some of those exhibits.
Okay, that would be lovely.
Yes, it would.
All right.
We'll leave Maud alone.
But that was funny when we got the call for that. We had to find a safe place for Maud.
I'm here with Mary Tibbetts, the curator here at the Admiral Digby Museum, and we're going to talk about a particular model called the
Princess Celine.
Right. It sort of looks like a mini Titanic, and hopefully the result wasn't the same.
It does look like the mini Titanic. I understand now it has been gone to the scrap heap over in Greece, but this was the ferry that all the baby boomers will remember as the best ferry of their lives. Shh. But don't tell anybody.
Don't tell anybody.
Yeah. But I grew up, I'm from Massachusetts originally. My mother was born here in Digby, so we vacationed all our lives here. And this was the ferry that we took over from St. John. And we had more fun, because that was back in the day where there weren't signs and ropes and what have you. So we ran around the car deck. We played on the ropes that they put over to tie us up to the wharf, and we just ran and ran with, you know.
It's a miracle any of us survived.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
The things that we would do at a certain age, right? So
yeah.
I imagine you were the same thing on this ship, yes?
Oh, sure. It was amazing. I actually feel bad for the kids of today who aren't going to experience what a true ferry ride is. You know, you drive on, and it was just fabulous. We had windstorms. We actually lost our little cowboy hats and whatever in a windstorm. One day my father was standing at the bow, and a wave came up, and he was in a suit and tie. Wave came up and just drenched him, because the water was a little bit rough that day. But the rougher it was, the more fun we had. We used to say, whenever there were a lot of waves and a big storm coming, we used to hop in the car and drive up so we could take the ferry across in the storm.
And how long did the ferry run?
What was that? I forget when it started. It closed down, I think, around 1962, and I think it started around 1950. I'd have to look that up. But yeah, I think it was around 1962 where it stopped running and was replaced by Princess Acadia.
Any interesting stories about that ferry at all? Ghosts or anything?
No, we never stayed still long enough for ghosts. But
They would have you medicated for something back in those days, right? But it was just the way it was, right?
It was just the way it was. It was just three kids having a grand time on the decks. We very rarely went inside on the ferry. We just had a great time.
That's beautiful.
And it stuck in our memories, as opposed to we've been everywhere. But the Princess Helene and the Annapolis Basin are where our hearts are.
Now, you were saying that you traveled extensively, but you ended up coming back here. Tell me why.
I really don't know. This is where my heart is. My mother was born here, as I said, and I think one of the biggest reasons that we love it was perhaps the clam bakes down on the beach. That was back in the day where you took a bunch of rocks and the seaweed, and you made a fire, and you went clamming yourself, and you had a clam bake with... you cooked it right there on the fire on the beach, and you had the clams and the corn on the cob, and it was the best. It was the most delicious.
Speaking of clam bakes, I see there's a clam right over there. And also on the ceiling are fish.
Yeah. Well, one of the museum's past presidents, Angela O'Neill, she had a little restaurant right at the end of the wharf. Her husband was a large fisherman in the area, and she had a little seafood restaurant just as you entered the wharf area. And it was the best seafood. It was so good. And when she closed her restaurant, she gave us all these fish. She loved the museum as much as the rest of us do. So we love it. We think it's a great display.
Is the restaurant still open?
No, unfortunately, Angela has retired.
So which restaurant now has the best seafood?
Oh, I can't name just one. They're all delicious.
So
yeah.
Whenever visitors come here, you're saying that any place you've got seafood here is going to be good.
It's great. I always prefer to mention the Digby scallops because my great uncle John is on the papers for the very first scallopers in the Digby area.
That's something.
So I always recommend the Digby
Well, you've
scallops.
got that reputation for Digby scallops, right?
Yes.
And hopefully we're going to...
Most romantic town in Canada is, I think, is...
I thought that was Niagara
Digby.
Falls.
No, that's Digby. You could look that up. You can Google that.
And you know what Oscar Wilde said about Niagara Falls?
What?
He said it's the second big disappointment with a young bride's wife. I don't know if you're going to be able to use that. And all this talk about scallops has made me hungry.
Well, all the restaurants in Digby have a beautiful view
So
of
you
the-
say.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll go have a romantic lunch. What are you doing for the next hour?
I'm on break. Let's go.
You're a wicked one, aren't you?
I'm... Yeah.
Well, Gail, we're upstairs here in the Admiral Digby Museum, and we're in a couple of the rooms here. We have the famous persons room, we have the war room, and we're in a bedroom. Now, there are certain furnishings and also clothing in here that perhaps we could talk about. I know you said that this, for example, is a crazy quilt.
On the bed is the crazy quilt, yes, and that was made by Charlotte Young in 1914.
Beginning of the war.
That's exactly right, yes.
Tends to be a Nova Scotia Maritime tradition, quilts, because I remember being a child, I had a quilt in my bed, my grandmother used to quilt, and my mother would have quilt. But some of these would have been quilting bees, where women would get together and
That
they
is
would make
exactly
quilts,
right.
And also, I'm looking at some very interesting things. Like, for example, I had no idea what this was.
Now, you can explain to me exactly what this is?
That is a bed key. Years ago, there was ropes on the bottom of the bed, and when the ropes would sag in the bed, they would use this instrument to tighten the ropes so everything would be level. And that is where sleep tight came from.
So you'd put it there and you just simply tighten it?
Tighten it, exactly right.
And of course, some of the other artifacts I'm familiar with. We have a slipper bedpan.
That's right. They don't make those like that anymore.
Well, no, we have indoor plumbing now.
Much
you might have heard.
Much improved.
Much improved.
Okay.
So, of
Yeah.
course, because it resembles a slipper, right?
That is exactly right.
And the other one will be a bedpan as well.
Right. And then you see this is like a hot water bottle,
So that would go
Yes.
down by your feet?
to keep your feet warm.
So back in the day, they used to have pans with coals they would put in it.
That is right.
And then they would heat it up underneath it. So this would
Okay.
be something
Yeah.
along those lines, and certainly much more safer, right?
Yes, much more safer, and hopefully it didn't leak.
And every room would have had a fireplace, but it still
Yes.
would have been very cold, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would have been.
And of course, the artifacts here all would have been donated as well, right?
Yes,
The
they
dresser,
would
the clock. I have a clock very similar to that at my parents' place. So
Oh.
somebody must have sold a lot of them in Nova Scotia at one time.
Perhaps, yes.
Now, does that one work? The one that my parents had didn't.
Now that I do not know.
Well, if you let me take it home, I'll have a look at it.
Okay, and you will bring it back?
Well, that's another question.
Okay.
Now, I know we're not just restricted to one bedroom. I know you have a famous room or rare room. What could visitors expect to see in that room?
Well, in the rare room, we have a lovely photo of the Ellis family, where we have the William Ellis who discovered the Ellis comet. So we have his photo with his relatives all together.
So he discovers he was an astronomer, obviously, and he discovered this unknown comet. Is this like Halley's Comet that it comes around every 76 years?
I don't know, I haven't looked it up.
I haven't looked it up because I want to know. Maybe that's
Yeah.
not Halley's Comet, that's Ellis's comet.
Well, it was Ellis's
That's what Gail
comet.
told me anyway.
Yeah, that's okay.
Right.
Well, that was and that, we acquired that from Eldith Ross Kay residence. And that was a real find because she had had it in her attic for years and years and years.
It's better to be seen than in an attic, right?
Yes, exactly,
Now,
exactly.
it's strange is that all these people, they're discovering comets. Hale Bopp found a comet.
I
now
know.
Ellis found a comet.
I
How many
know.
comets are out there, I wonder?
Well, maybe you should go find out.
We're in the war room. Now, a lot of these things I recognize because, I'm a historical animator and it's been, an interest of mine for a long time. But I understand that a lot of this was donated by local people who had family that were in the military. There's a personal connection with you as well, I understand.
Yes, there is. There is. The duffel bag that is behind me was donated by my uncle Robert Hersey. And my dad has donated a couple of items here in the room as well. And every year we have a Remembrance Day service, and we are always represented at those events.
Well, it's a wonderful thing that goes on in Canada that Remembrance Day is such an important event for all of us.
Right.
Because I think these wars, considering we had such a small population at the time, would have touched so many families.
Very much so.
I'm looking around and I see things like, for example, trench art. I knew, for example, you see two shells that came from Vimy Ridge.
That is correct.
Now, according to Pierre Burton, we've all read his book, the Battle of Vimy Ridge was something that determined us finally as a nation and free from Britain. Because it was the first time, as I understand it, that the Canadians went into battle with their own officers and they did something that the British and the French couldn't do. which was to take Vimy Ridge.
They did.
They did,
Yes.
which is a point of pride. So I love to see that, and I see some of the uniforms, all of which were donated by local people.
That is
which
right.
is wonderful.
Isn't it?
Now, I was looking over, I see that there's the nurse's uniform, but I was also looking at the doctor's kit, and I don't see any anesthetic in there.
Not today.
Not today.
Okay.
So that must have been pretty gruesome. You don't know if you're worse off if you see the doctor coming or not.
That's true.
All these wonderful exhibits.
Yes.
I understand that you have something you'd like to read, but what are your hours of operation?
When Mary is here, usually from 9 until 5.
Do you put that on the sign? When Mary's here, we're open.
That is
That'd be very Nova Scotia, you know. You
Yes.
put that up.
It helps. Yes, about usually from 9 to 5. And during the summer, I believe that they will be opened on Saturdays if we get the 3 students that we have applied for.
All right. And anything else you have, bake sales or anything like that you'd be doing in the course of the summer?
Well, Mike Parker, he has his latest book that is coming out, and he will be having a gathering here at the museum in the fall. And for fundraising in the past, we have done an item of writing letters to people about a bakeless sale. And people will send money for whatever they would think they would like to buy in the cooking area. It could be a cheesecake, it could be a chocolate cake, it could be homemade pudding, and they send us the money as though they were purchasing the food.
That's a great idea.
It was.
Great, I imagine,
It
send me
was.
your money and I'll send you nothing back.
So take a bite out of that.
Take a bite out of that, exactly, right?
And then lastly, there's something I would like to mention. Our nonprofit society is trying our level best to keep our doors open and the property and the building up to provincial and federal standards. We truly need to preserve our history and historical building, as well as our valuable archival material. And we have a lovely archival department, genealogy department, and we have 466 binders. So if you want to do some family research, please drop by. And also come to the Admiral Digby Museum for a visit and check us out. In fact, you can become a member of our local historical society, and we truly would appreciate that. Thank you so very much for watching and listening. Thank you.
Now, you read that without glasses?
Yes, but I do have glasses.
Oh, I was going to say, you want to trade eyes? Now,
Well, we can.
before we go, I'd like to go and have a selfie with Maud.
Yes, you
Can we
may.
go have a peek?
Yes. Good idea.
Good idea.
All right.
I want to thank you, Gail.
You're quite welcome.
Wonderful visit.
Okay.
And I highly recommend that people come and see this wonderful museum.
Thank you so much.
And since this is Digby, I think maybe I should go and have a great big plate of scallops.
Oh, yes, by all means.
By all means. And then maybe go have a peek at Maud Lewis.
But
Maybe get a selfie.
that would be the dessert.
So I'll give you that. There we go.
All right.
COVID fist pump.
Yes.
And it's been a pleasure.
Okay.